He dismissed the films before the lights even dimmed. Sitting in the front row of a Manila screening room, the foreign director leaned back, arms crossed, whispering to his assistant that Filipino cinema relied too much on sentiment. He had come as an authority, invited, respected, already convinced nothing here could surprise him. He was known internationally for restraint and minimalism. Festival juries praised his discipline. Emotion, he believed, should be controlled, never indulgent. When asked in an interview earlier that day about Philippine films, he smiled politely and said they were well-meaning but repetitive. The comment spread quietly through the local film community. The invitation to the screening came anyway. No confrontation, no public response. Just a small, independently produced film scheduled for a late evening slot. The director assumed it was courtesy, a gesture of hospitality. He expected to leave early, confirmed in his belief, untouched by what he was about to see. The theater was modest, slightly worn seats, a projector that hummed louder than it should. Around him sat students, crew members, a few older faces who looked like they had lived inside movie houses for decades. No red carpet, no speeches, just quiet anticipation as the lights dimmed. The film opened without music. A long shot of a provincial bus terminal at dawn. Vendors setting up. A woman counting coins twice before buying coffee. Nothing dramatic. The director shifted in his seat unimpressed. He had seen realism before. This, he thought, was familiar territory. Minutes passed. The story followed an aging projectionist in a dying provincial cinema. No grand conflict, just routine. Sweeping floors. Rewinding reels. Fixing a broken chair with wire. The foreign director checked his watch. Still, something held the room's attention, an unspoken patience. The first emotional turn arrived quietly. A power outage mid-screening inside the film. The audience on screen waited in darkness. No complaints. Someone lit a cigarette. Someone laughed softly. The projectionist apologized anyway. In the real theater, no one moved. The director noticed the silence. The film did not explain itself. It trusted the viewer. Small gestures carried meaning. A hand resting on a shoulder. A pause before answering a question. The director felt unsettled, not by intensity, but by restraint. This was not emotional excess. This was something slower, deeper. Halfway through, the projectionist learned the cinema would be demolished. No speech followed. He nodded, finished his shift, locked the door carefully. The director leaned forward now. The simplicity unsettled him. He realized he was waiting for something loud that never came. In the audience around him, reactions were subtle. A woman wiped her eyes quickly, almost embarrassed. A young man clenched his jaw. No one whispered. No one checked a phone. The director noticed how the room breathed together, as if the film belonged to them. The climax arrived without announcement. On the cinema's final night, only 3 people attended. The projectionist ran the film anyway. He aligned the reel carefully, as if performing a ritual. The screen flickered. Dust floated in the beam of light. The director felt his throat tighten. The film ended on an empty screen. No music, no final line, just darkness. The credits rolled silently. For several seconds after the lights came up, no one clapped. Not because they were unimpressed, but because something felt complete. The director stayed seated, staring ahead. Applause eventually rose, restrained but sincere. The director did not join immediately. His hands rested on his knees. His earlier words replayed in his mind, boring, repetitive, sentimental. None of them fit what he had just witnessed. He felt an unfamiliar discomfort. A young Filipino filmmaker stood briefly to thank the audience. No grand speech, just gratitude. She acknowledged her crew, her parents, the projectionist who inspired the story. Her voice shook slightly, then steadied. The director noticed how she bowed her head before leaving the stage. After the screening, people exited quietly. No debates, no arguments. Outside, the night air was thick and warm. Jeepneys passed. Somewhere, karaoke echoed faintly. The director stood near the entrance, unsure why he had not left yet. He felt as though he had missed something before. The filmmaker approached him without hesitation. She did not challenge his earlier remarks. She thanked him for coming and asked what he thought. The director searched for a measured response, but found non-ready. He said only that the film was precise. She smiled and said nothing more. That silence unsettled him more than any defense could have. He realized she was not waiting for validation. The film had already done its work. Around them, crew members packed equipment carefully, as if preserving something fragile. The director watched their hands, their focus. Later that night, alone in his hotel room, he replayed the film in his mind. Not scenes, moments, pauses, restraint, dignity. He recognized the discipline he claimed to value, expressed differently, rooted in lived experience rather than theory. The realization was humbling. The next day, during a panel discussion, he was asked again about Filipino cinema. The room waited. Cameras pointed forward. He paused longer than expected. He spoke of the screening, of patience, of stories that did not ask for attention, but earned it through honesty. He admitted, without apology or drama, that he had been wrong, not about taste, but about assumption. He said some cinemas speak softly because their audiences already understand the weight of what is unsaid. The room remained quiet. Several filmmakers looked down, absorbing the words. After the panel, no one celebrated. No one confronted him. Filipino filmmakers continued their work, editing, writing, rehearsing. The change had already occurred where it mattered, not in public acknowledgement, but in private recalibration. The authority he carried felt lighter now. Before leaving Manila, the director requested copies of several local films. Not recommendations, just titles he had seen flyers for. He did not frame it as research. He framed it as listening. At the airport, he watched rough cuts on a laptop, undisturbed by delays. On his flight home, he wrote notes he had never written before, not about structure or pacing, but about humility, about allowing space for audiences to bring their own history into a film. He underlined one phrase twice. Emotion does not need permission. Months later, his next film premiered internationally. Critics noted a shift, longer silences, fewer explanations, a tenderness that surprised those who followed his work. In interviews, he cited no influence directly, but those who knew recognized echoes of that Manila screening. The Filipino filmmaker returned to her province. She taught workshops, screened films in small halls. She never mentioned the foreign director. Her focus remained on the people who watched quietly, who stayed seated after the lights came up, who felt seen without being told how to feel. The old provincial cinema in her film was eventually demolished in real life. A convenience store replaced it. Yet the story continued traveling. Screened in classrooms, festivals, borrowed projectors humming softly in borrowed rooms. The humanity it carried did not need a building to survive. In conversations years later, the director described that screening as a turning point, not because it impressed him, but because it disarmed him. Authority, he learned, could blind as easily as it could guide. The most lasting lessons often arrived without confrontation. Filipino cinema did not change to meet his standards. It never needed to. It continued telling stories shaped by patience, resilience, and quiet endurance. Stories that trusted audiences to listen closely. Stories that did not announce their power, but carried it steadily. The screening that changed his perspective was never marketed as such. No headlines marked the moment. Yet in that small, worn theater, a balance shifted, not through argument or praise, but through an honest portrayal of life, offered without demand. He arrived believing he was there to judge. He left understanding he had been invited to witness. In that exchange, Filipino cinema did not seek victory. It offered truth. And in the stillness after the screen went dark, that quiet humanity spoke louder than any critique ever could.